Well, it is a great story, and that video, which I'm absolutely delighted that we found it, and it's the only copy in the world, I believe. So it's worth millions. The 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 comparison between what Brisbane was doing to promote Brisbane, and then Billawheeler was just so enthusiastic about getting the silo, and there is a group of people in Billawheeler. Don Morris is one of them. The the issue of promotion of a regional district is just so difficult, and we're talking here with 30 years of hindsight. When we were putting together the idea of a major regional centre, using the silo as the focus, we had so many, I suppose, grand plans about how townships like Armidale, Forbes, Parks, in Queensland, Clermont, and the areas of Emerald, Toowoomba, all could have become major centres with an energy and transport corridor linking Melbourne up to Gladstone and then on to Darwin. So the whole principle of regional development was that if this transport and energy corridor was developed, the East Coast would be serviced from this industrial heartland. And fast trains and airports and trucks, and the problem that we were facing in those days was the volume of trucks on the Pacific Highway. And so we saw it as a fairly logical principle of regional development to look at what we call the Volvo Line. Now, Volvo did a major study in regard to how the economy of Australia is very buoyant in the big East Coast cities and gradually drops off until you hit what we call the Volvo Line. And if the Volvo Line was the basis of the line north-south or south-north for an energy and transport corridor, where all sorts of resources like electricity, gas, water were there alongside the freight trains and the airport and transport hubs, it would be a fantastic boon. So Billawheeler, when it made that video, was armed with all of these principles. And 35 years later, we're still battling the issue of how to build the inland freight line, not necessarily the grand vision of an energy and transport corridor. So that's where the enthusiasm came from.
And obviously Errol Compton is the man, the go-to man in relation to the inland freight rail line. Even at his tender age, he's still a huge driving force behind that project.
Well, he's it's in the hands of the shareholders and proponents at this stage. Errol was the driving force behind the common sense approach to regional development. And as I said in previous interviews, every meeting that Errol and I attended, we'd always ask the Dorothy Dix question about the Minister for Regional Development and if we could meet him. And the portfolio is divided still in two. It's too fractured, and the state boundaries don't help at all in regard to national transport and energy systems. So we've got a long way to go in terms of actually getting it right for 7/8 of the country. And this current issue of the airlines, the two airline policy, it's there before our very eyes, the problems we face, and how the government needs to be very aware that a national transport strategy is really the key issue. And that national transport strategy would include rail, air, regional hubs that would handle basically 90% of the freight, and that freight then would be transported into the big cities.
You're raising many, many interesting questions.
And Billawheeler would be one of those major growth zones.
You'd think so. As you said previously, you grew up around Hewinton, and there seems to be a logical connection from Cairns to Hewinton to Billawheeler, down to Toowoomba, into Parkes, Dubbo, and then, you know, to Adelaide and Melbourne. But yeah, just absolutely and totally fascinating. Now, coming back to the core crux of the issue in relation to Billawheeler and its tourism potential, it obviously started out with a huge vision. How many years did you keep in contact with what was going on there, and at what stage did you realise that the wheels had well and truly fallen off the wagon as such?
Well, we didn't ever bow out. We've been always there. We were very involved with the strategy and the operations for Year of the Outback. We masterminded the way in which an increased number of city-based people would get to know the bush. So a lot of people saw it initially as the bush patting the bush on the back. We made it very clear our agenda was promotion of the outback area to the city people. Now, when we talk about city people, at that point, year 2000, we had 8 million new Australians in the 10 years previous. And what was extremely important to understand is that a lot of those people who came here would work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and for 2 generations to find their place in this new country. And then the older people went out and travelled into the outback. And for the first time in their lives, they got to understand what regional Australia was about. And it didn't take them very long to want to know more. And so the whole issue of Year of the Outback, the legacies in regard to what Outback Australia could be, and I'm saying that on the basis of the massive international tourist trade that comes into Australia from Northern Europe, and lots of people just love to study this long history of ours. It's really quite unique. The cultural issues, the science, the bush knowledge. You know, we have an organisation in Alice Springs called Desert Knowledge, and the capacity for Australia to be the biggest income earner for desert knowledge is just there for the taking. But we just don't have the, let's say, the political will to drive it to the next level.
Well, as I said, let's hope the work that's put into saving this or reskinning the primary industries pavilion leads to an opening of the door, because it was one of the triumphs of the 30th anniversary when our committee was able to convince the Bureau of International Exhibits to allow Queensland to use the world's largest Expo legacy footprint, which goes from Brisbane to Longreach with the drovers around the campfire, or just the drovers, depending on which John Underwood book you look at, and then obviously to Billawheeler with the primary industries pavilion, which is the reason why I'm so wedded to its restoration, saving and promotion.
Yes, well, we back you 100%. We think it's fantastic.
Well, I'm sure our work over the last week bears testament to that. So,
I think once momentum is gained, the mandate for the next 20 years must be written. what is it that they want to achieve. And as you said, the recent publicity video probably cuts it too short of what can be achieved in central Queensland and indeed regional Australia.
Well, there were a number, I must admit.
Yeah.
But that one I particularly focused on, A, because it was so well made, B, it had a very clear idea of what its vision was about. The other ones were not as clear and didn't really give any particular idea of what tourists could actually see and or do. And at least the one that I chose gave a very clear indication that for tourists who want to visit us, these are 5 things you can do and can experience.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
All right.
So okay, thank you.
And I'm going to go back to having my dinner, and we'll no doubt catch up again when I've edited this tonight's series. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.